Hey, how are you all doing? As always, I got something a little bit different for you this time around because today we'll be talking about Sergeant Frederick Hobson, whose story I actually came across recently, but it was just too badass to pass up. And my last War Stories episode actually got age restricted, which is pretty fair to be honest. But with that being said, if you guys really like this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe. And with all that out of the way, let's get right into this. Frederick Hobson was born in England on September 23rd, 1873. He had already seen action serving with the British Army in the Second Boer War, which took place between 1899 and 1902. He immigrated to Canada in 1904, settling in Cambridge, Ontario, which was formerly known at the time as Galt. Frederick was one of the first to enlist in the Canadian Corps, and he would join at the ripe age of 41 years old. He would be assigned to the 20th Battalion within the 2nd Canadian Division, and there's not a lot documented about Frederick Hobson's life, but what you can find online is his recruitment sheet, which gives a little bit of insight into Frederick's story, with the sheet detailing that he was a father and a shopkeeper, and is pretty much the only personal information that you can find about him, which says a lot about how unknown this story is. Frederick was given the rank of sergeant, and he took his role very seriously. He would look over his fellow troops, and with him already being a veteran, he was admired by his fellow comrades. On April 9th, 1917, 20,000 Canadians began an assault on Vimy Ridge, which was a brutal, well-coordinated attack launched by the Canadians. This assault would involve 4 Canadian divisions made up of over 100,000 men, and after this major victory concluded, another occupied city not far from Vimy Ridge was seen as a strategic point to continue the Canadian advance. But first, they would need to take Hill 70, which overlooked the city of Lens, and Hill 70 would become the site of another well-coordinated attack. Canadian engineers began firing barrels of burning oil at the German positions, along with a barrage of artillery that followed suit. Meanwhile, the infantry had been popping smoke and pushing in on the enemy positions. Key points along the German trench line were quickly overwhelmed and taken by the Canadians, who had all been covered by a massive smoke screen and burning oil. But as the Canadians advanced, the Germans would dig in. They started to push the Canadians back on the hill, and this is where Frederick Hobson and his unit would come into play. His company would be assigned to hold a key position that was taken, and they would be struck by a massive artillery barrage. Frederick's entire company had all been pretty much wiped out, but as soon as the shelling stopped, Frederick, while wounded, composed himself and began digging and ripping men out of the mud who were still able to fight. He spotted a machine gun and its gunner calling out for help. He sprinted over, and Frederick frantically dug out the man in the machine gun, all while hundreds of Germans charged their trench that was ripe for the taking. He pulled the soldier out of the mud, but began taking heavy fire. Then he cleared out the machine gun's belt feeder as best he could, while bullets cracked all around him. The Germans were now at the edge of his trench, but then Frederick began to open up fire on them. Catching them off guard, Frederick was able to kill multiple of the attackers, continuously firing at the German wave of soldiers until the gun jammed. He ordered the man next to him to unjam the feeder. Then Frederick sprung out of the trench with nothing but a rifle and bayonet. He charged the oncoming Germans, firing his rifle to the last bullet, where he then proceeded to take on the assault in hand-to-hand combat. He managed to kill a few more men with his bayonet before he was struck down. Frederick managed to kill 14 men just in this vicious last stand, all while being ripped apart by bullets and being previously injured by the shelling. But it would give the gunner enough time to clear his machine gun, along with a few other Canadians who regrouped and formed a line of fire. The Germans would continue the assault on the position to no avail, as the Canadians would reinforce shortly after Frederick's death. Frederick Hobson was buried with full honors and was awarded the Victoria Cross. and I like to think has become a Canadian legend and badass. Well, guys, I hope you liked that story. If you really, really liked it, don't forget to share it as it's definitely a lesser known one. And with all that, I'll catch you guys in the comments.